The same team, you know, these are the cheerleaders and the players. They work together. And the average voter gets caught in the middle of this. He hasn't any idea what's going on. He just thinks that the debate is such that he has to choose. Who are you going to vote for? You're going to vote Republican or you're going to vote Democrat. And so as long as they're in that role, they're like a tennis ball in a tennis match. They get hit back and forth across the net. First they're on the right, bing, then they're back on the left, bing, back they're on the right. They're Republican, they're Democrat. And the game goes on and on and on. And although it's possible for the players of that game to win, the tennis ball never wins that game. So I think it's time for people to stop being tennis balls in this game and just get out of the game completely. There are certain issues that people on the left and the right in American politics will never discuss. And the reason they won't discuss them is because they agree mutually. The Democrats and the Republicans agree on something, so they don't want to talk about it in public debate because it reveals the fact that they're basically the same. They only talk about things on which they disagree. Turns out that the things on which they agree are the most important things. The things in which they disagree are relatively minor. So the things in which they agree are, for example, our foreign policy. They both agree that the desired goal eventually is to move the United States into world government. Not just any world government, but a world government based on the model of collectivism. In other words, big, powerful, centralized world government. If it were a world government based on the principles of freedom and freedom of choice, freedom of culture, low intervention, if no intervention in the lives of normal human beings, it might be a wonderful thing, but that's not the kind of world government the left and the right have in mind. They're talking about total world government with all major decisions being made at the top and people at the bottom being essentially living in a feudalist society, just serfs. And peasants, basically, in a high-tech feudalism. And the left and the right both agree with that goal, and so they never discuss it in public debate. Another thing in which they agree is the dominance of the banking system in our economy and, to a large extent, in our politics. They both agree that the banks are supreme, that the banks must be protected, that the banks must be funded, they must be bailed out, they must not be allowed to fail. When the banks make bad loans to third world countries, or if they make bad loans to large corporations, both the Republicans and the Democrats agree that we must come in with taxpayers' money, either tax money or inflation money, and we must bail out the banks. And we do that, they both agree, by giving the money to these corporations and giving the money to the third world countries so that they can continue to make interest payments to the banks. So those are two major issues, I would say perhaps the largest issues we could possibly face. And so we find that Republicans and Democrats are in agreement on that. You might add another third topic if you wish, and that is our role in the Middle East. Both parties talk alternately about, oh, we've got to end this war in the Middle East, pull our troops home, you know, and all that sort of thing. But that's just rhetoric. You notice we go from one party to the other. The war continues, the war grows, the funding continues. So there we have three major issues, perhaps the three largest issues of all, and there's no debate between Republicans and Democrats as to what to do. Though there may be some debate in rhetoric, they may give speeches, but when it's time to vote in Congress, there is no division between them at all. And this itself should be the biggest giveaway as to what the reality of politics is today. If anybody that's got their eyes open, they ought to be able to see it just by examining those three issues. I do believe that when Ron Paul ran for president and, to everyone's amazement, achieved such great support in spite of the roadblocks that were put in front of him, and in spite of the total disinterest on the part of the major media, so that he was practically unknown to large segments of the people. Parenthetically, I would say that if the media had given Ron Paul anywhere near the same exposure they gave to the Republican and Democrat, I mean the old-style Republican and Democrat Party candidates, I think he probably would have been elected. But anyway, that was sort of a phenomenal event, that somebody who did not have the endorsement of the establishment and who spoke so clearly on issues, the very issues that we were talking about, the issues of the war, the issues of the economy and bailing out the banks and the Federal Reserve System, and the issue of national sovereignty. These are issues that mainstream Republicans and Democrats don't want to touch because they agree on that. Ron Paul disagreed with what the Republican and Democrat Party were doing on that, and so he spoke about it. And the fact that, in spite of the fact that he was the only one talking about these issues, he got so much support, tells me that there is a latent power, there's a latent awareness on the part of the American people just waiting to be tapped. I think those who are controlling the two-party system are very much afraid of that. They don't want that to be tapped. And that's why they are working so hard now to put controls on the internet, because the message that Ron Paul was delivering was primarily delivered over the internet, not through the major channels of communication. So now we see almost daily efforts on the part of the mainstream political figures to concoct different ways and different reasons and different excuses for putting controls on the internet. They're going to license people so that you can't even have a blog, they say, unless you have a license from the government. They want to put filters on the search engines so that you can't even look up certain words and things like that. Actually, I think what they're trying to do here in this country is pretty much imitate what they're already doing in China, for example. They really admire that system in China. Our own figures here in this country, although they may speak with scorn about a closed society in China, they're doing everything they can to imitate it. So that's one of the realities we have to look at. So what does this mean for the future? I think that as long as the internet can be kept open and free, it bodes very well for us, because I think we do have at last a chance to get around the mainstream media. But I think that if the governments of the world, and particularly in our own government, if they're successful in putting legal restrictions on and clamping down on the internet, I'm afraid that the chances of a maverick moving against the establishment become very, very small indeed.